Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador has promised a thorough investigation after at least 24 people were killed and dozens injured when a subway bridge collapsed in the Mexican capital. Spain's Conservative Popular Party has secured a solid win in the Madrid regional government elections, more than doubling the amount of seats in the last vote 2 years ago, while former Deputy Prime Minister Pablo Iglesias has announced he's quitting politics following his defeat. Foreign ministers and representatives of the Group of Seven, or G7, kicked off a two-day meeting to address global challenges. Headquarters of teleSUR English in Havana, Cuba. This is from the south, and I'm Katrina Goss. We begin in Mexico, where this Tuesday emergency services retrieved the bodies of those killed when an elevated metro line collapsed in the capital. President Andrés Manuel López Obrador promised a full investigation into the accident, which raised questions on construction standards on a network used by millions every day. According to Mexico City Mayor Claudia Sheinbaum, there were several minors among the 20 victims, while dozens were injured. Nearly 80 people received hospital treatment following a dramatic accident, one of the worst to hit the subway system in the capital. Dozens of emergency workers initiated rescue efforts to pull victims out from the carriages, but the works had to be suspended because of fears the wreckage was too unstable. The efforts later resumed with the help of a crane.
A thorough investigation will be carried out without overlooking anything in order to know the truth. I put myself at the disposal of the authorities in all that is necessary to clarify and to determine the responsibilities that may arise. Here I am at your disposal, as always. When you establish what happened with verified evidence, you can establish who is responsible for it. It is the most terrible accident we have ever had in the public transportation system.
Colombia has seen widespread protests and popular outcry against the neoliberal package of measures promoted by President Ivan Duque, which includes a series of detrimental reforms to education, health and of the most vulnerable sectors of the country. Our correspondent Hernan Tobar has the story.
Colombia's streets continue to be the stage for marches and protests, and despite the withdrawal of the tax reform bill that triggered the demonstrations, the demands of different social sectors continue to grow in the face of increased repression and the accumulation of unattended needs that have resulted in high rates of poverty and unemployment.
I am a victim of this system because I have been working for 7 years and I don't have a single peso because I had to spend it all paying for my college loans. In addition to that, today I am unemployed and I am not only marching for myself, I am marching for my siblings who are younger than me and who are going to face very difficult conditions.
Within the framework of these demonstrations, there have been denunciations by human rights organizations and social movements regarding the increasing abuses of state security forces, including attacks with firearms and arbitrary detentions. According to the NGO Temblores, between April 28th and May 1st, there were 92 cases of physical violence, 21 victims of murderous violence by the police, 672 arbitrary detentions, 4 victims of sexual violence by the public forces, figures that may continue to increase since the repression does not cease.
The police and the anti-riot squadron are there to protect their people and their citizens, and not to be against them. Remember that, Mr. Policeman. Remember that, Mr. Smat. You are also part of the citizenship, and please honor the oath that you took, pledging in all of your hymns and when you became a police officer, to protect the population and citizens, not to murder or rape women.
And while students work to raise awareness in the midst of the marches, others joined the demands for the elimination of the health reform that is being studied in the Colombian Congress as a matter of urgency.
Basically, the patient is not prioritized as a human being, but as a commodity.
Added to this social discontent against the policies of the Duque administration, taxi drivers from all over the country are requesting the regulation of the use of digital transportation platforms, which they denounce are backhumping them, for which they demand the resignation of the president.
There is a song that goes Duque Chao, Duque Chao, Duque Chao. Here we don't want Duque anymore. Duque, you are a complete dirtbag. Because you are selling us out. You are nailing us. You are killing us. You have to fulfill your campaign promises. They are not just words.
Various sectors involved in these demonstrations claim that marches and mobilizations will continue against the militarization of the cities, which give a warlike nature to the protest, for the elimination of the health reform, for the dismantling of the anti-riot squadron, for mass vaccination, among other proposals. A new day of protest is called for this Wednesday, with the participation of the different social platforms and the workers' federations.
Hernán Darío Tobar, TeleSUR, Bogotá, Colombia.
On Tuesday, the United Nations Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights expressed its deep concern about the events that took place in the southwestern Colombian city of Cali.
Alarmed at developments in the city of Cali in Colombia overnight, where police opened fire on demonstrators protesting against tax reforms, reportedly killing and injuring a number of people. Our office in Colombia is working to verify the exact number of casualties and establish how this terrible incident came about in Cali. Human rights defenders are also reporting they have been harassed and threatened.
And the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights has received reports of at least 14 deaths in the violent repression against protesters in Colombia.
Also, that law enforcement officers should abide by the principles of legality, precaution, necessity, and proportionality when policing demonstrations. Firearms can only be used as a measure of last resort against an imminent threat to life or a serious injury. Since 28 April, the Human Rights Office of the United Nations has received allegations of at least 14 deaths in the context of the protests in different parts of Colombia, including at least one officer.
And this Tuesday, the European Union condemned the violence of Colombian security forces against demonstrators and called for those responsible for the repression to be brought to justice. A spokesperson for the European External Action Service condemned the acts of violence which undermine the legitimate rights to protest, freedom of assembly and expression, and it stressed that it's very important that these rights are respected. The official also called for an end to the escalating violence and expressed the EU's confidence in Colombian institutions to investigate and prosecute those responsible for any violation of human rights. And we'll be right back after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. Spain's Conservative Popular Party has secured a solid win in the Madrid regional government elections, more than doubling the amount of seats it won in the last vote 2 years ago, and returning outspoken hardliner Isabel Díaz Ayuso to the regional presidency. With more than 96% of the vote counted, the Popular Party has secured 65 seats compared to the 30 it obtained in 2019 and remains 4 seats away from the absolute majority in an election viewed as indicative of the future political direction of the country. The left, split between 3 parties, has suffered a blow, particularly in the case of the United We Can party of former Deputy Prime Minister Pablo Iglesias, who stood down from the national post to run in the regional elections. The party came last with 10 seats, 3 more than in the last vote. The More Madrid party has been the surprise of the night on surpassing the ruling Socialist Workers' Party in votes and securing the same number of seats at 24. The Socialist Workers' Party thus loses 13 seats in its worst historical result in the community. Meanwhile, the far-right Vox party rises from 5th to 4th force with 13 representatives, 1 more than in 2019. The worst predictions were fulfilled in the case of the Citizens Party, which had ruled in a coalition with the Popular Party and lost all 26 seats, thus left without representation in the Assembly of Madrid. And former Deputy Prime Minister Pablo Iglesias of the United We Can party, who left the national government to run in the regional elections, has announced that he is leaving all posts and quitting politics. The left had hoped to secure control of the community of Madrid, the wealthiest in the country and with a major influence in terms of national politics. The election campaign was mired by far-right attacks on the left, including the sending of death threats to Iglesias and other leftists, which winner Isabel Díaz Ayuso refused to condemn. Thus continues the 26-year conservative rule of Madrid. Voters returned to the polls in a Spanish community of Madrid this Tuesday, just 2 years after the previous elections of 2019, following the resignation of regional president Isabel Díaz Ayuso on March 10th. Earlier this Tuesday, Esther Rebollo, assistant director of the Spanish online newspaper Público, brought us a summary of the voting process on this important day for Spanish politics.
Like day, residents of Madrid go out to vote today to elect their regional government. After a campaign marked by the pandemic and also a campaign full of problems and difficulties, above all very polarized, citizens are debating between two blocs, the right and the left. Either of them could win. Everything will depend on voter participation. By midday, it was announced that 28% of Madrid residents who had been called to the polls had cast their ballot. This means 2 percentage points more than in the 2019 elections. It was also revealed that citizens in working class and industrial areas around the city of Madrid have significantly increased their participation in these elections. We must not forget that the Conservative Popular Party has been in power in Madrid for 26 years. We are at the entrance of a polling station in the Latina neighborhood, in the historic center of Madrid. Precisely in this neighborhood, voters have always supported the left. In the previous elections of 2019, more than 61% voted for the three left-wing parties, with the more Madrid parties receiving the most votes from residents of this neighborhood. The polling stations will close at 8 p.m. Here in Madrid, the last hour on election day is reserved for COVID-19 patients and those people with symptoms of the disease. The results will be known a few hours later.
Desde Madrid.
India crossed the 20 million COVID-19 cases mark on Tuesday during a second wave that has seen the collapse of the country's healthcare system and prompted calls from the opposition for a total lockdown of the population. The country recorded about 357,000 new infections on Tuesday, according to the latest data from the Health Ministry, bringing the total number of cases since the start of the pandemic to 20.2 million. Authorities also reported around 3,400 fatalities in 24 hours, bringing the total death toll to over 222,000, although experts have warned that the official data falls short of the reality. India has administered 158 million vaccine doses so far, although the pace has slowed down. In the last 24 hours, 1.7 million people have received shots.
The government has to at least arrange for a proper oxygen supply in all the hospitals. Nobody should be dying because oxygen has run out. If patients get a proper oxygen supply, at least we can treat them and prevent death. Everybody is facing some problem or the other. For us, auto rickshaw drivers, if we don't take passengers or work, then we are in trouble. And if we take passengers, then we are also at risk.
The Danish Health Authority has decided to drop the Johnson & Johnson vaccine from its mass coronavirus vaccination program. According to the Deputy Director General of the agency, health authorities took the decision based on reported side effects, including a possible risk of severe blood clots for people receiving the jabs. The decision will affect those in the 20 to 39 age group, who will now face a delay of up to 4 weeks in their vaccination. However, the authority noted that the decision does not rule out that Johnson & Johnson vaccines may be used later. The Deputy Executive Director of the Tokyo 2020 Olympic Games Operations Bureau explained some of the virus restrictions planned for foreign athletes competing in the Olympic Marathon, which will be held in Japan's northern city of Sapporo. With only 2 months to go to the scheduled date for the Games, Japan has imposed an emergency state for several prefectures given the increase in COVID-19 infections, which has sparked demands from some sectors to postpone or cancel the event.
They will each undergo PCR tests on departure from their country and a series of tests on arrival in Japan. In addition, they will be subjected to daily screening tests during their stay. Thus, the competition is organized under close surveillance. Foreign athletes will not use public transports, and in principle they will not be meeting members of the public. Their movements will be under stringent regulations.
And we have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. On Tuesday, foreign ministers and representatives of the Group of Seven, or G7, kicked off a two-day face-to-face meeting to address the global challenges that the bloc of wealthy nations believes threaten their democracies. Among the issues to be addressed will be relations with Russia, China and Iran, as well as the situation in Myanmar following last February's military takeover, the violence in Ethiopia and the ongoing terrorist war in Syria. G7 ministers will also discuss the response to the COVID-19 health crisis and climate change, among other issues. At a joint press conference on Monday, UK Foreign Minister Dominic Raab and US Secretary of State Antony Blinken made it clear that Russia and China will occupy the bulk of the agenda, although both officials claimed that neither Washington nor London wish to engage in direct confrontation with these powers. Negotiations to engage all sides in the conflict in Yemen in peace talks are underway at the United Nations Security Council, according to Lebanese-based Pan-Arab television network Al Mayadeen. An international consensus is gaining momentum to cancel Security Council Resolution 2216, which puts the blame for the conflict on one of the factions in the war, the northern Yemeni government led by the Islamic movement Ansar Allah, also known as the Houthis. Saudi Arabia and its regional allies launched a deadly war against Yemen in March 2015, killing thousands and bringing about the world's worst humanitarian crisis, according to the United Nations. Tanzania's new president, Samia Suluhu Hassan, and Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta pledged to cooperate and renew bilateral relations after years of trade and turf wars during a two-day visit by the Tanzanian leader to Nairobi.
During our discussions, we agree how to promote trade and investment between Kenya and Tanzania. As you are all aware, our countries have lots of potential in agriculture, industrialization, fishing, animal husbandry and tourism.
This trip gives us an opportunity to renew our bilateral relations. On our end, we assure you that the Republic of Kenya and my government will be front-runners in working with your administration.
In Afghanistan, flash floods caused by heavy rains have resulted in the deaths of at least 16 people, including 4 children, while 10 people remain missing, according to local officials. Heavy rains overnight Monday caused severe flooding in 9 provinces, sparking damages to livestock and farmland. The State Ministry for Disaster Management reported in a statement that hundreds of acres of farmland and orchards and nearly 250 houses have been damaged or destroyed in the natural disaster. Relief efforts have begun in the affected provinces, while rescue teams are trying to locate residents who remain missing. On Monday, the Supreme Constitutional Court of Syria announced the acceptance of 3 of the 51 applications to stand in the presidential elections scheduled for May 26. The announcement marks the beginning of a new phase of the electoral process, which started on April 19th. Our correspondent Hisham Wanas has the details.
The Supreme Constitutional Court of Syria, in its initial ruling, authorized the candidacy of Bashar al-Assad, along with 2 others, to stand for president of the country in the upcoming elections. The other applications were denied because they did not meet the constitutional and legal requirements. Those whose applications have been denied have the right to file an appeal to the Supreme Constitutional Court within 3 days from Tuesday, May the 4th, and the current decision is preliminary and not final, and does not entitle the accepted applicants to start their election campaigns before announcing the final list after the appeals have been answered. After the end of the period of submitting and receiving responses to any appeals, the top judicial body will announce its final decision on the accepted candidates and set the date for the start of their election campaigns. Syrians inside and outside the country are called upon to fulfill their constitutional duty and right to elect the right person to lead them in the current circumstances of terrorist and economic war facing their homeland.
There are parties that try to discredit the democratic development of these elections and seek to undermine their holding. Yet the decision is down to Syrians themselves, and will always be. And despite all the challenges, Syrians are determined to continue with this process, and to participate and fulfill their duty, and right to elect the right person, who will represent their aspirations and be their partner in building the future of Syria. Citizens have the opportunity to choose among the approved candidates, and this represents a patriotic responsibility, a duty and a constitutional right that citizens must fulfill by participating in the voting on the date scheduled, to define the future of their country after long years of war. We are confident that these elections will be a real turning point in the history of Syria.
Meanwhile, the Western campaign to undermine the legitimacy of these elections continues. Syrians denounce the unacceptable interference in the country's internal affairs. They consider that the presidential elections constitute a political triumph that complements the victories of their national army in the fight against foreign terrorism, and prove their determination to rebuild their country, define its future, and preserve its sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity.
teleSUR, Damascus, Syria.
And we've come to the end of this news brief. Remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net, and you can also join us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and Telegram. For teleSUR English, I'm Katrina Goss, and thank you for watching.